That's
check the recording.
Okay. I'm probably straight.
Yeah, I think it will work like that also. Okay.
Is that better now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. That would have actually fit our festival theme well if it would have been like 90 degrees, as our theme is Nolo. And okay, I was hearing the echo, but no, it's actually still there a little bit of the echo. I don't know if maybe if you turn down the volume a little bit, it will disappear. Check 1, 2. Yes, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Any better?
Yeah. Now I don't hear myself. Easier to concentrate. But yeah, our festival theme, like I think I wrote you. I'm not going to put this on the thing yet. It's just like we can talk a little bit before the interview. Like I told you, it's Nolo, which translates to like embarrassing or the feeling of being ashamed. So it also has given us a leeway for the festival production all year. If we mess something up, it's just part of the theme. So like that would have also fitted to have it 90 degrees. But hey,
I'm all about that.
hopefully we can talk a little bit about that also. But
sure.
Before going to the questions, I can also tell you a little bit about the screening. The screening is on Thursday, and we start with This is Roller Skating, which is a documentary short like 1950s quad inline skating.
That's exciting.
And then we continue with Dance Roller Skating Unifies a Community in Los Angeles, LA Roll. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about the LA.
I haven't seen it. No, not yet.
Yeah, it's about LA roller disco scene. It has like damn funk and all kinds of good funky music. And
that's great.
It's like a 17-minute thing. And then we have which I think is your friend Dom West. From him we have Streets of Lagos also.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah,
he mentioned that you are good friends.
Yeah, we've known each other for a good while. He's a great person.
Nice. And then we have Wizard of Wall Street from Leon Basin with some wizard skating.
Amazing.
And then this Superhero of Helsinki, about this older inline skater who is sort of like a superhero and like in the superhero scene saving people, and has quite a funky dress style also, and
I love it.
It's a short and that, and then we will end with Full Spiral from you and our Q&A.
Awesome.
After that.
That's great. I'm so excited to be such a part of an amazing schedule. That's great.
Yeah, we're really happy to connect and get your video to the festival.
Yeah, likewise. Very very honored that you've reached out. It's very touching, and hyped just to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Too bad I can't be there. But
yeah, that would be super cool. But maybe one day in the future, you never know.
Exactly.
And also, like I wrote, your skating has been really inspirational for me, as like I skated from 95 to 99 or something like that. But then like 22 years I haven't skated. But this spring, I think like one of the main things was maybe seeing like the full spiral and this kind of style of skating, and sort of, like you don't have to do death-defying stunts, and you can just like have fun and do little tricks. And today I got my first alley-oop acid on a curb in 22 years, which was
amazing.
Super fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, but I think we can start the the official part of the interview.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. All right. So welcome, Robbie Pitts, to our screening of rollerblading and quad skating videos, and thank you so much for letting us screen your amazing movie Full Spiral. And
thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
I think like probably part of our audience are players, but also maybe even most are not. So we can start with some bit more basic questions. How long have you been skating?
I kind of officially say I started skating in 1998. I'd been on skates before that a little bit, but when I officially got my like kind of first pair of aggressive skates is when I sort of say I started skating, because that's when I really never stopped. So that was like 1998, and yeah, 34 years old and still skating, still enjoy it, and in some ways more connected with it than I ever have been.
What attracted to you originally to skating, and what's attracting you still to be doing it at such a like active level?
Sure. When I first started, it was mostly, I think it looked so fun and unique and different. I'd played some traditional sports. I played cricket before that, and I didn't really feel that comfortable with, you know, the team aspect, and then even having a coach, and it being very rigid. And there was something about just seeing, you know, skaters, which are these skaters in Europe and in America, and even Australia, actually, that just excited me. Just seeing someone like jumping in the air, doing a grab or sliding on a rail. It just looked so fun. And kind of also there was an aspect of it is that you shouldn't be doing it. It wasn't something that like the adults of the time were engaging in or promoting. So it was something very much of the youth. And I really connected with that. When I started, I just went out with my friends, and no one was telling you what to do. You were just doing it on your own and trying to do the things you saw in a magazine or in a video. And that spirit just kept on going. It started off just with a small group of friends. Then I met some more in my city, in my town. And then I moved city, and then I connected with you know, a whole scene when I moved to Melbourne. And then from Melbourne, it went to the entire, you know, country of Australia. And then I eventually went to the United States, and it just kept on growing. And really at this point, I think the reason why I skate is, one, I just still find it so fun. The fact of just rolling around, I think, is such a simple pleasure, and just doing a little, you know, little spin on the ground, or just kind of moving your body side to side and feeling the flow is just something I'll always appreciate. And it takes me back to the earliest days of my skating. But also I think the fact that at this point in skating, I find for myself, there is this great connection between artistic expression and the actual act of the skating. Because alongside skating my whole life, I've also been a designer and an artist. And there was this great point maybe about 6 years ago where I feel like I started a journey where I felt I was creating skating that was in an essence a little bit conceptual, you know, commenting on the I suppose the historical part of skating, and just doing things in kind of a new way. And every time I would go out in skating, you know, in the street, it really was finding something new, and you know, maybe challenging traditional ways of how people have already skated, thinking how you can maybe skate an obstacle different. And all of these things just kind of evolved. And in a lot of ways, every time I keep skating now or thinking about doing a new project, is thinking about how I can explore things that I haven't done. And so that was sort of the trajectory, I would say. It's gone at this moment now. I just feel like a lot of it is more to do with how I move and fill the kind of space with these elements of almost dance-like movements, you know, kicking and sliding and all that together. It just makes a really kind of fun experience for me. So that's kind of where I'm at with it and why I keep doing it. This is, yeah.
What do you think? Like skating used to be super popular in the 90s and going into the 2000s, but why do you think it sort of disappeared from the mainstream map, and why is it having a little bit of a renewed interest, or do you think it is having that kind of moment?
I definitely agree. It definitely has, you know, a renewed interest at the moment. I was working at a skate shop in Australia last year and earlier this year, and the amount of skates that were just being sold and going out the door was just amazing. And for someone who's been in it since '98 and seeing that resurgence, it's really beautiful to see. You're right, it did have that dip, as you know, most people who've been in the community for a long time knows. I feel like there's a lot of varying factors that played into that. You know, like a lot of it does get attributed to skateboarding, and I should say the skateboarding industry, which then you know, trickled down into just like individuals within skateboarding, you know, emulating behavior that they saw of other people and putting down rollerbladers. It was just a very common thing that happened, you know, in at least in the early 2000s. And I think, like with anything that's new and fresh and doesn't really have any kind of so-called foundation, that's passing itself off as a culture, may end up going through a cycle where it ends up being kind of a fad, that it's not something that has stability to keep on going. Like so many cultures have done that, and skateboarding is a great one to look at as well. It has such a long, rich history, and if you really pay attention to all the different periods and generations it's gone through, there's many moments where it became a huge outsider. You know, hardly any participants are doing it. And I think similarly, you know, just with rollerblading, it had to go through different stages of growing, different stages of its culture, and it, you know, it's not only its participants, both professionally and amateur, and just regular people who are involved. I think it was a necessary kind of step, because it went from so big to really so small. So it had such a really small group of people throughout the world collectively just pursuing it because they loved it. And I think at this point, it's just being at the right moment, the right time. We have social media. You know, we'd gone through a pandemic, and you know, rollerblading is one of those activities that you could do, you know, individually or maybe with a few other people or whatnot, safely. And it's such a simple pleasure. And I think there's been such a long time since the origin of inline skating that people are now reconnecting with it, either reconnecting with it for the first time in a long time, or they're reconnecting it for the first time ever. So I think there's a whole rethinking of what is possible. And not only that, what we do, I suppose, in the world that I exist in, that has had its own trajectory, you know, for the past 30 years as well. And now there is more more styles and diversity in the way that you can skate, and there's also a lot more respect and openness to skating in different ways. In the past, there may have been more of a one-way kind of way that people thought you should skate, but now I feel like it's so open, and there are so many different, you know, practitioners in the skating community, skating in so many different ways, and you can just find what you like and find people that you like to skate with, and in the end, you're all still a part of the same thing. So it's a pretty amazing moment, I think. I think if anything, it's kind of been this is the healthiest skating may ever have been.
Yeah, maybe it's coming into the mainstream culture with its own terms more. Like before, there was a lot of pressure maybe to try to show skating as a super hyper masculine and aggressive, to sort of counter the pressure that was coming from skateboard industry and also just like mainstream culture that tried to make rollerblading into like a joke, or and use this kind of like homophobia in society to pressure people to try to be super aggressive and do death-defying stunts. And maybe now, as there has not been this kind of pressure and eyes on the sport, now it can be more like you said, varied with different kinds of styles of skating.
Absolutely. I think also, you know, for better or for worse, rollerblading, or at least the aggressive rollerblading world, has always been very male dominated, and also it's always been a very young sport. We haven't had a lot of very old or older skaters. There's always been, you know, handfuls, but at least like the generations are now getting older. You know, we have people who have been skating for a really long time, generations past who have now entered their 40s, their mid 40s, maybe even their 50s. So in, let's say the early 2000s, you still have a lot of people who are in their early 20s or even really talented at 16, 17 years old. And for anyone at that age, you're very confused and not really sure of who you are or whatnot. So you're battling that. But not only that, let's say if it's just a whole bunch of boys, there might be this, hyper masculine competitiveness as well that is like fueling one another to do the bigger, the better thing in maybe in a playful spirit as well. But it's I feel like there's a lot of different factors that are attributed to that direction that the culture took. Also the fact of this concept of having to prove itself, to the other mainstream action sports community, because the fact that it was starting to be considered in their eyes a joke, or it was very easily to be made fun of for whatnot. But I think at this point, because there's been so much growth and so many of the people who've been it for so long have grown older, there is definitely a level of maturity that is in the community now that has never been there before. And you also have such, the great thing is you do have newer generations, and particularly in Asia, South America, and Europe, so many young kids skating. And, the greatest thing about the youth is that, they aren't born into this world with any of the prejudice of the histories of these things. So they just come at it with such a new, fresh perspective. So it's amazing. It's amazing to see where it's going to go, and particularly seeing a lot of the young skaters embrace not only newer styles of skating, but even being intrigued with the older styles too, and taking what they like, maybe disregarding the stuff that they feel like, okay, I don't really identify with that. We can leave that in the past. And it's an exciting time to see where it's going to go. That's kind of how I see it at this point.
Yeah, and I think definitely the new generation, they are not so rigid with like what sport or action sport you choose and want to do. There are like skateboarders who also scoot and might even play and do it all. What about for you personally? Because of course rollerblading is inspired by skateboarding. Do you watch skateboarding movies, or do they inspire the way you make rollerblading movies?
I'm always inspired by the skateboarding community. I think because of its level of what's history that it has, it's so rich. Also its level of professionalism. All of those things are really inspiring. I think you cannot deny the fact of how much rollerblading, particularly in the past and its early years, took from skateboarding, and I think anything that's new and fresh will always adopt things from different areas, whether it's someone who's transitioned over from that previous activity to the new one is going to bring things over. The very fact that we grind, and slide on things or jump things is thankful. We have to be consciously thankful of skateboarding very much for that. But for me, at this point in my life, I remember I was so conscious of how much rollerblading was appropriating skateboarding tricks and also the spot selections and all those things. In the past 5 to 10 years was something I became really conscious of. And not only myself, but there were a lot of other people also at the time, much smaller groups of people who were participating in more non-traditional styles of skating who were challenging those conventions. And that style of skating always inspired me. And I felt personally that I wanted to explore more rollerblading centric tricks, because I felt that what we did was very unique and people were underutilizing what was special about rollerblading and the ability of what rollerblades, inline skates give us access to. So, like, to be honest, most of my skating has kind of come from me just being out exploring the fact that, like, okay, what is possible? You're literally, it's an extension of you just being on 2 feet. So how you move through spaces, you have 2 feet. You also, you have your hands. There's so many things that you could do that I feel like rollerblading was underutilizing at that time. in the past. So for me, it was really about like trying to do things that I felt were not borrowing from other sports or other activities, or at least not too heavily. Like I would say, as I've been skating the past, like, you know, not 3 or 4 years, I think my skating over the course of the sections that I've been making has evolved. Like I think the skating that I'm doing now is a little different to like the skating I was doing 5 years ago, where that might have been still unconventional, but a little bit more closer to the traditional side of aggressive skating. Like now I'm more inspired by utilizing less obstacles, utilizing just the ground, utilizing how I can just move my body in the simplest form of like jumping in the air or sliding on the ground. And I suppose through that, it's inspired more through dance. And I don't really have a rich history through dance or anything like that, really at all. It's interesting how there's been a lot of people over the years that have attributed associations with my skating. Like a lot of people, you know, have said, "Oh, your skating like has such like a disco feel to it. You know, it reminds me of dance," or like, "Oh, it reminds me a little bit of parkour." And I think those things are just more associations than me taking inspirations from those areas and bringing it in. It's a great like comparison, because I think the thing is those activities have such similarities, and that's where I see, like, you know, when people say like dancing or even parkour is much like rollerblading, is the fact that there you go, there's so much opportunity that, you know, and unbroken ground that rollerblading has still to offer. And you could imagine what if these people in these other areas, like imagine a professional dancer, you know, coming in and trying to do aggressive skating and infusing their history into aggressive skating and seeing where that could go, or a parkour skater. I mean, we're seeing so many skiers transition into rollerblading these days, and it's just incredible. I just think it's such an amazing time to see where it's going to go. And I like, for me, I'm always just trying to explore the things that I feel inspired by at the moment. I try not to, you know, keep going over the same ground or the terrain that I've sort of done in the past, maybe utilizing things here and there, but I always find that I'm most excited about trying something new that I haven't done. And that's not really focused on it has to be big or better. It's just seeing, oh, I've never done that before. How am I going to feel doing it? And you just try it. Sometimes it surprises you, and it's like, oh, that's really awesome. I'm gonna keep doing that. And then usually in that moment, you're like, I want to film it and document it and put it out there, you know. And if other people like it and are inspired by it, that's just the greatest byproduct of just doing something you love.
Yeah, and sort of that also makes me think about mistakes, and that's sort of one venue to find new styles and maybe new moves in rollerblading. And from what I understand, you embrace mistakes, and our festival theme is Nolo, which means embarrassment or the state of being ashamed. And I think most of us usually the first feeling we get from doing or making mistakes is being ashamed and maybe going away from the mistake. But you have also embraced mistakes in your skating.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. There's a lot of like small movements sometimes that just I've done in the past more out of instinct. And there was a tipping point where I realized that those are things I actually should embrace, because they're so you know, unique to the moment. I might not be able to, you know, replicate them, but there's something really special in those. So like sometimes, you know, like maybe when I would land something, my like one of my feet would come up, and then I would sort of naturally maybe like jump out or whatever. And I started like maybe being more conscious of doing it and continuing the flow each time I would do these tricks, and this would happen. And then it might get to the point where I'm doing that same motion, but then I'm like, well, how can I take that to the furthest point? Okay, my one foot's coming out, maybe I'll kick it straight out. So then I emphasize the whole thing, and then it turns actually into almost like this little dance movement. And I think like all those little elements that are unpredictable are kind of almost the more fun and unique aspects in skating. Like I've always been growing up, I was very perfectionistic, and I actually found over the years that it always brought me a little bit of anxiety, because you're constantly always trying to refine the things and get it to this concept of perfection, which in a lot of ways is unattainable. You know, at some point you have to, it's all subjective, because at some point it's what you decide is perfection, you know. And so, and a lot of the times when I was trying to seek a perfection, I feel like it was taking away from any of the interesting you know, spontaneous moments that would come out. I was actually restricting myself from many you know, random acts, which I would say at this point, all of those random acts are a big part of what I would describe as my expression in skating. So I've tried to keep my skating really loose in that way, you know, and a lot of times, even if it's going to a skate spot and having an idea, just being able to like go, oh, okay, maybe that isn't going to work, you know, but you're trying it and it could be above your skill set. It may not feel good. And just thinking, oh, well, how can I change something? Or even in the process of trying the trick, something may just come out, you know, that's a little bit irregular. I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. You might identify it. Your friends might identify it. The person who's filming you might identify it. And you, if you're open, you can just go down that kind of little rabbit hole, and you might end up exploring something that you may not have thought of when you first go into it. So like literally at this point, I think mistakes are the growing process to something that is unknown territory. The point that, you know, you could start somewhere and you can end up in a completely different area that you intended in. And that's kind of like the most exciting thing, I think, for me, is like seeing what's possible within yourself and the things that you enjoy in this life. And if you're always closed, you're never gonna grow, you're never gonna go on a journey, and you're never gonna be able to and something that makes you feel good.
We cut out a little bit in the end of what you were saying.
Oh,
so
do you want me to go back? I can re-say that if you want.
Yeah, well, if you can rewind a little bit. So it was just like the last sentence that we missed.
Oh, okay. Like honestly, I think that the goal, at least for myself, and is the very fact that like we're always on a journey, and sometimes you can start out somewhere, and the place where you end up could be so far from the original origin of where you're going. And it's always less about the actual end goal that you're at. It's about the journey that you take. And it's just, I think in an essence, it's openness. If you allow yourself to explore these mistakes and these things that you try, all of that represents growth and journey. And so if anything, I really feel like mistakes are so important, because the people who can embrace mistakes and take it within themselves to put themselves out there, be on the fringe of vulnerability, not afraid to create an error, will ultimately bring something new to themselves, not only in a sense of like unknown territory, but it's also knowing what you do like, what you don't like, and all through that process, it's growth, and you end up in a place that you're not going to have expected in the beginning. And a lot of the time, it's going to be fun, new, fresh. And that's, I think, at the essence, all what we want.
Obviously, you've thought about skating in a really deep way and thought about it a lot and meditated on all the dimensions of the art of skating. Do you think you've incorporated the same the mentalities that you've learned in skating to your art in filmmaking, for example, and graphic design?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like all of those interests actually stemmed from rollerblading in the beginning, because I was so immersed in the culture that I just loved all of the brands, and then all like I watched so many of the videos and the magazines and the brands and what people wore, And I never really thought of it, but in a lot of ways, like, skating is also a little bit of a fashion show. Like, people may not want to be the ones to admit it, but when you're out skating, more than not, a lot of people are like thinking about how, like, what someone's wearing, and what someone's wearing may really inform how you interpret the trick, whether you like it even more or not, or whatever. Aesthetics play a really big part in skating. And so, personally, I've learned a lot about the visual medium through skating, because I studied its videos and its media so much in its life. And that's what took me into the practice of graphic design or photography or filmmaking. And like, for me, like, what happened with Full Spiral is I found that there was an artistic expression that I feel like I hadn't explored, because, like, one of the things when you're a skater, you don't really, like, you're in control of your image. You can choose the tricks that you want to do, the places you want to skate, the way you want to dress, all of those things. However, sometimes, when you're putting your skating out there in the world, you're working with a filmmaker. You're working with someone who has their vision, and that alone is a great collaboration and can take you to these new ways, because the way they may see you may be very different to the way you see yourself, and something really beautiful comes of that. But for me, at least with Full Spiral, I knew that there was a vision that I had for myself that I wanted to explore, and I was in a great opportunity where I was able to do that. And so I feel like Full Spiral actually is almost like the culmination of all of these disciplines that I've been practicing over the years, all together, creating this interesting synergy. And like, in a lot of ways, I wanted to take it to the most extreme, where it can have like so many different varying reactions of that it could be hilarious, it could inspire fun, it could inspire joy, it could inspire confusion, or outrage. I feel like the gamut is kind of there, and the one thing that I strive for in filmmaking is to, and particularly with rollerblading, is to have an emotional reaction. Like, that it not only just be like, wow, that is impressive, but that may, the emotional reaction could be, that inspires me to skate. That inspires me to want to try something. That inspires me want to wear a shirt that I've never worn before. It might inspire me to go skate my downtown area that I've always been wanting to go skating there, but maybe I should. I want to skate faster. I want to do a trick that I've never done before. All of those things are just little kind of like extra goals that I feel like I'm conscious of when I'm making the videos, because I think not only are you doing it for yourself and your own expression, like, as someone who's a public figure, you're conscious of how people are going to be interacting with your art. And I think it's always important, at least I think, if people can take something positive from what you do. In the end, you have to believe in yourself and you have to love your vision. And I think if you do have that kind of confidence and that conviction, that will resonate with your audience, and your audience will find you, whether it's one person or not. And you never know what can happen through that, connection of someone seeing what you do. And and again, it comes down to just these little journeys that you can take. You never know what you're going to do if you try something a little different.
What are the craziest things that have happened to you after Full Spiral? I would imagine that it speaks to a lot of different kind of people outside the skating community as well. So, like, yep. If I'm correct, I think you were in a LA Times feature. And
yes, yeah, recently, Ryan Schutte, wonderful photographer, and also a great rollerblading photographer from the past, with Daily Bread and many other magazines. A good friend of mine, he invited me on that shoot because he had this wonderful opportunity to include rollerblading in LA Times. And so I feel like any of those opportunities, I'll jump at a hat at, because I feel like ultimately I want to be able to show not only what I do, but the culture that means so much to me, to a wider audience of people, you know, because I think in the end, if I enjoy doing this, someone else has got to enjoy it as well. And so it to be honest, the reaction from Full Spiral was so overwhelmingly positive. It really warmed my heart in the sense that, like, you know, I have a lot of people telling me how much just the the common one is that, like, wow, you look like you're having so much fun, you know. And another one, you know, might be that, like, you've inspired me to try skating a little differently, or thinking, like, as you were saying earlier, the fact of, like, you know, losing the kind of pressures of having to skate a certain way, you know, of maybe feeling that, like, oh, well, Robbie's skating this way, that gives me a license or confidence to be able to be like, oh no, that's okay, I can skate, you know, a little curb, or I can do some stair rides and feel fine with them and feel comfortable with them. So a lot of people have said to me that they're really inspired by the skating. You know, there was a lovely person on the weekend who told me that they inspired me in terms of, like, how they were dressing, and they had tie-dyed a pair of pants, you know. So all of these little things I really take as a little victory, not necessarily for myself, but for every one of those people who find something in it and are doing something new for themselves. I think that's the thing. If you can just do you, and everyone else has these, like, positive moments that could hopefully extend into new things for their life, that's what gets me so excited. So I'm, like, so appreciative of anyone who takes anything from my skating. And it might even be, this is the other thing, it might even be there are people who see my skating and be like, I don't like that at all, I don't identify with that at all. But the greatest thing about that is it might inspire them to do the skating that they like, you know. So, like, it doesn't bother me if someone doesn't like my skating, if it inspires them to keep following the skating that they like doing, and showing that, you know, this is my take on skating. That's the best thing, because that's what I'm doing. So if everyone just does that, we're going to have so much different, you know, styles out there that, you know, new people and people who have been skating for a while can pick and choose and find new things.
Well, what's next for you after you made this amazing skating film? Do you already have the concept ready for the next video, or what's your next goal?
Yes, I would like to make something new. I feel like with most videos, video sections that I make, they're this arc, they're this journey that you go on, and, you know, you're constant. I used to find for myself, I'm finding I am exploring new territory all throughout it, and particularly when you get to the end, of when you decide that you're not going to film for that project anymore, I'm already sort of exploring new things that I wasn't doing in the beginning. So I kind of continue exploring those things afterwards, and I feel like, at least at this point, I know going into Full Spiral, it was like that. There were all these things that I wanted to explore and put down and film and put into this vision. And at this point, it's kind of the same thing. There's things that I was exploring at the end of Full Spiral that I have been exploring over the past year that I want to document and create into something new. But yeah, ultimately, you know, like, I kind of always want to create something that, you know, is a little different from something that I've done before. You know, I can't deny the things that I am interested in, or the aesthetics that I do embrace. So there's always going to be some elements of continuity. But for me, like, just trying something a little different each time is always kind of the goal for me. And collaborating with new people as well, I always think is the greatest thing I can do as well, because, like, throughout that, you're always going to find new ways of interpreting yourself, and the end product is always going to be a little different. So yeah, I'm excited for what does come next, you know. So whenever that happens, I'm excited to share it with you all.
All right, thank you very much, Robbie Pitts. And do you have any greetings or last words to our festival audience?
I hope you enjoyed Full Spiral. I hope it brought the whole spectrum of emotions. If you do skate, awesome. You're wonderful. Thank you for being part of our global community. If you don't, I hope it inspires you to maybe try out some skating, whether it's on rollerblades, inline skates, or roller skating, or skateboarding. You know, whichever it is, like fun on wheels is some of the greatest things out there. You know, and you know, also this opportunity really means a lot to me. Just extending it, you know, full spiral into all areas of the world, and I hope to one day, you know, visit Finland. It would be wonderful. So if and when that happens, let's all get together, let's all skate. And, you know, I guess all I can say is enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you so much. I really appreciate, you know, this little time to chat. Our emails together were always so awesome, hearing about your little journeys in skating and you know, the stuff that you're getting involved in, you know, now that you've had such a break from it. It's awesome. I makes me excited, you know, that there's people in all areas of this whole planet just stoked on skating. So sick.
All right, thank you. And now I will press stop on